What's up guys, it's the Womster, and today we're going to be making another video kind of like the driver video I made earlier, where I told you about all the different driver matchups and what to use in each situation. But this time we're going to be doing it for the disc frames instead. So similarly to each driver, each disc frame has a certain setup where it will work the best and other setups where it will not work or not work as well as some other frame. So and contrary to popular belief, it's not just putting the heaviest frame on everything. So on top of just providing like 2 or 3 extra grams of weight, which isn't terribly significant most of the time, frames will also, they can support contact points on attack layers, or they can also provide life after death to certain combos. So let's go over, I guess, when you would use each of these. And just as a disclaimer, if a frame isn't mentioned in this video, I either don't have it, or a use has not currently been discovered for it, or I just forgot it, which probably the last one if it's not in the video. But these are all the frames plus a few that I bring to tournaments. So these are all the frames I could ever see myself using in a competitive setting as of right now. So let's start off with like the first ones to be released. Or actually, no. So I guess the first thing you do when you decide what frame you're going to use is the combo you're going to use. If you're going to use an attack type, you're probably going to want a frame that will support that layer best. So for example, I always use Vortex with my winning Valkyrie combo because they're both 3-sided. The points on Vortex line up well with the points on winning Valkyrie, and while the frame doesn't actually hit opponents very often at all, it still provides like weight distribution in the correct places for the part. And another example of this would be dagger with dagger with dead Hades, and a lot of people use 10 dagger because those both line up with dead Hades oval shape pretty well. There's a few other examples, but they're just, I know people use hit with the Excalibur series because that lines up, but there's not very many viable attack layers, so there's not really very many examples I can use nowadays. And if you don't have one that will match up, then you can just use something that's kind of like unobtrusive. Or actually, if you have, so for 1 contact point, people usually use hit. For 2, people usually use dagger. 3 is Vortex. There's not really a frame that's designed with 4 contact points in mind yet. So what people would use with like Zet Achilles and Legend Spriggan when they use them is Meteor, which is actually 5-sided, but it's close enough that it works in most setups. Even though for Legend Spriggan, people usually use Star now because dual spin is allowed now, and Meteor only faces right while Star faces just kind of out, so it can be both directions. And if you can't really find a frame that matches your layer, then you can just use something that will provide a small amount of weight while being like unobtrusive to the combo. Like bump is what I would go to after that. I didn't have dagger, so I used bump in my dead Hades combos because it provides like a decent amount of outward weight distribution on the edge of the disc while not being like super obstructive and scraping early like heavier frames like lift or turn would. So that's it for attack. So for non-attack, this is when it gets kind of complicated because there's synergy between certain frames and certain drivers with how they fall over to generate life after death. So first we can start with the cone-shaped ones like Revolve and Eternal. Because of the way they're shaped and the way they fall over, they are generally better without a frame, and in that case you would want to use 7 or 10 or 5 or 8 dash, or I guess even 1 dash. Any disc with, hold on. But in that case, we would want to use any disc with a smooth under perimeter, kind of like these. This is 5 right here. This is 7. They were the most commonly used on Revolve or Bearing or Eternal without a frame, because they end up being smoother and hitting the ground in the right way that Cross and Glaive and other frames do not. So in those cases you would want to use a smooth disc with no frame. For Atomic, depending on your spin direction, you're going to want to use Cross and right spin, or Glaive and left spin. These generally have more stamina and more life after death than Bump does, or Lift or Turn, or any of the other frames, just because they have the smoother underside. Although because of the way Glaive points, it should really only be used in left spin. Cross is pretty good all around. Like, I'd still say it's probably one of the best it's the best all-around frame in the game. But it works worse than Glaive does in left spin in my testing. So Cross or Glaive is the choice for Atomic. And also Proof, the frame that was recently released with the Geistfafnir DLC. So Proof is kind of like Polish used to be. Proof will I find that it will outspin both Cross and Glaive in opposite spin, while not suffering like the same spin stamina loss that Polish did. Maybe because Polish has just less stamina than the core discs, but I haven't found it to scrape like particularly early like Polish did and lose because of that. Proof, Cross, and Glaive also work on Destroy pretty well. Atomic and Destroy, not Eternal. I have no clue about Octa, because I don't have Octa. And Shindog also says that if you have the outer disc, which I also don't have yet, but I will have it in like a month hopefully, works really well on Eternal, and probably Revolve and Bearing too. So after that, what to use on Bearing. So there used to be a rule of thumb I always had for using a frame on Bearing, and if it's that, because people were using Bump on it, and my rule of thumb was that if you can balance tune your combo well enough on Bearing that it does not fall over when you put the Bump frame on it, but if Bump lowers the center of gravity enough that your combo will not fall over, then you can use Bump. But otherwise, it might be better just to use Glaive in left spin, or no disc at all in right spin, or not no disc, no frame at all in right spin. There have been a few instances of Spriggan Requiem 7 Bearing beating Spriggan Requiem 7 Bump Bearing, just because Bump will scrape because the combo isn't well balanced enough, and the 7 without the Bump will just not scrape because there's nothing to scrape on. And I actually had KJ test this in a few setups. Granted, this was with the Hasbro Bearing, but they're the same shape. Glaive actually works better in left spin than no frame. However, no frame works better than Cross for some strange reason in right spin. I'm not sure why that is, but that's the results that his test gave me. So you should only use Bump on Bearing if it balances well enough that your combo doesn't fall over. And now we have new frames, Lift and Turn. that people are using on bearing. Lift is basically the polish of bearing. I find that it helps bearing it gives bearing so much more precision in life after death. Like, your bearing combo will basically not fall over if you use lift in down skirt mode. That's what people call it, but we don't know the official name yet. But basically when you have lift like this, it will keep bearing upright longer. The problem is that it reaches down so low that if you are in a same spin matchup against another bearing, then something like bump or glaive or cross will outspin you just because you'll scrape, and you won't be able to spin steal because you're in the same spin. So lift is kind of a risky frame to use, though it is effective. It's super popular in Japan and I think the Philippines because they allow you to change Spriggan Requiem spin direction mid-battle, and the WBO does not. So you never have to worry about the same spin matchup using lift in either of those countries under their rule sets. And turn seems to be in a similar situation, though I don't quite understand how. Lift is at least like kind of smooth on the underside, and it's got like the kind of shape. Turn just really doesn't. Turn seems like it's an attack frame that people were trying to use for stamina. I'm still not entirely sold on the beating lift, because like it seems like it would scrape even worse, just have like a bad contact with the ground and opposite spin. Shindog is saying that it can outspin lift and opposite spin, but I'd want to see more testing about that before confirming for sure. One thing I do like these super heavy frames like turn and lift on is actually hold, because like I was saying, the rule of thumb about bump is to only use it when your combo doesn't fall over and you don't have to worry about the rough surface scraping on the ground. So if you have a good enough hold, you can just lower the center of gravity enough. I used my heaviest 0, which was my heaviest core disc, and then my heaviest turn frame on my Hill Salamander hold combo, and it just doesn't fall over. So you don't even have to worry about like the lack of life after death or smooth surface, because it just doesn't. You don't scrape. You don't need to worry about scraping if you don't scrape. And let's see what else. Extend plus. You'll also want to use cross or glaive for that. You don't want to use proof, is something I found out this weekend. NDHG used proof against Archer Hercules, I think 10 Eternal, and actually lost 0-3. It was Hell Salamander, something proof, extend plus. And I was like, wow, extend plus is supposed to beat Eternal, this thing is losing. You shouldn't put proof on this. But no, I know some people don't like putting a frame on extend plus. Personally, I think it's a little better with cross. Or cross or glaive from what I've tested. But I would need to like go into more depth as to any specific matchups that this frame or no frame wins or loses with that combo. And the last two frames are just kind of niche, I think. Flow is really popular in both the west coast of the US and I think in some Asian countries. I believe what it does is that it provides like the most same spin stamina, and that it will outspin most other frames in same spin on like a mirror match. Because I know King Lufa was able to beat Tangy Blader's Hell Salamander 7 cross atomic with 7 flow atomic. He consistently uses flow on his bearing combos to outspin other bearing combos in same spin and opposite spin sometimes. Personally, I don't really see the advantage of using this frame over something like cross, which provides, I think, a pretty good amount of same spin stamina and also some pretty good life after death in pretty much all situations. But if you want to use flow, you can. It will give you, it may or may not beat cross. The results I was getting between the two is inconsistent, but it's still a frame that many people use, and I think it's worth mentioning in the video. And then last but not least is under. Under is kind of weird. It's a bit like lift or turn in that, as the name suggests, it kind of like reaches below the disc. This doesn't really help very much, I don't think, in most situations. Some people use it because it's four-sided, it kind of matches up with Bloody Longinus on their stationary BL combos. I've tried it on that a few times, and I didn't like how early it was scraping compared to Glaive, so I stick with Glaive on those usually. And something I found under to work kind of well on is Nightmare Longinus or Luinor L3, just because I think the connection point for the frame on this Beyblade is at a slightly different height than a normal disc would be on any other Beyblade. And that makes under sit at like a unique height where this one specific combo, which is NL under variable, will actually have some not bad life after death just because of the way variable will fall over on the under at that certain height. Alright, so overall, I think I've gone over most, if not all, of the just frames I might use in any competitive situation. So this has just been a video on what drivers or just what combos they work best on. I hope you found it informative. Maybe you could use it with the driver's video to figure out which frame works best with which driver in each situation. But yeah, I will see you guys next time.